Welcome. You're tuned in to the We Are All Artists podcast, a space where we talk about living life as a conscious creative. I'm your host, Adriana Douglas. Our intention is to support you throughout the process of discovering your inner artist and transforming from the inside out. Here in this space, we believe that the way out is through. On the other side is a world with more art, more beauty, and access to more of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today. And now let's begin. To help you ring in the new year, I have something new for you all. I made a free resource guide of all the things that have helped me over the past few years and essentially what blueprint I wish I had when I was starting out a journey of living more intentionally. This blueprint is for you if you are a DIYer, if you want to get an idea of some of the areas that I really like to go into detail with when I work with folks, and or if you really just want to get a jump start on your journey and you want to do it independently at the moment without any further support from a community or a mentor, and feel that this would be supportive in getting you oriented to a new way of being. I really believe that if you pick just one of these books or one of these areas, that you will learn a lot about yourself and have so much more awareness and compassion for the journey. And my wish for you is that this guide makes you feel more inspired and more connected to yourself and gets you to take that next right action for you on your journey. Hello, and happy 2024 to everybody. I hope you all have the most wonderful year ahead. And thank you so much for coming back and listening to the show. I'm truly grateful for all of you. Today, we have Sarah Brooks on the show. Sarah is a freelance content writer and storytelling strategist. So we talked all about websites, content strategy. We went into art therapy a little bit, social media boundaries, and all in all, things that you think about when you are starting a business and you need to be writing copy, building a website, having social media. And so I hope this episode inspires you as much as it inspired me, and that you reach out to Sarah for any of your content writing, storytelling needs. Hi, Sarah. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really excited. It's been a very long time since we've seen each other. So I'm glad to have you on and catch up. It's going to be really fun.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a minute, but I also feel like no time at all because the pandemic was like a weird time warp vortex situation. So I also feel like we were just in this group together yesterday.
Yeah, like we just met 5 minutes ago.
Yep, pretty much.
I know. It's like pandemic time was, like you're saying, literally a vortex.
It really was.
We're all coming out of it, I think.
Yeah, I hope so.
I hope things feel normal again. So I'd really love to start off the interview and just have our audience get to know you a little bit and what you do, what you're currently up to, where you are in the world.
Wonderful. I'm Sarah Brooks. I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I moved here about a year ago from Chicago, where I had been my whole life. And I'm doing an art therapy graduate program here. On the side, or just my main business, is a freelance content strategy and copywriting business. So I work mainly with women-owned small businesses, small, medium-sized businesses, and then B2B SaaS clients as well, doing everything from websites to blogs to content strategy, emails, what have you. So that's kind of what I'm up to these days.
Ooh, when you said websites and blogs, I was just thinking just diving right into it. How do you stay inspired creatively when you're writing for other people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually think it's easier to write copy for others than for yourself. Like when I did my own website, 2.5 years ago, it was like the hardest thing I've ever done because I was like, is this true about myself? Like you're just looking at it through another kind of angle that is not as fun. When writing with other people, I think it's very fun. And I always tell my clients this too, that I can be this mirror for them. Like I can illuminate parts of their story that maybe they're not sharing or they're not hyping up as much because it's them, and they're so close to it. So that's kind of what I try to do with my work. And then just as far as like staying creatively inspired, I look at a lot of websites, I read a lot of websites, I kind of analyze a lot of websites and see what folks are doing well, what they could be doing better. If I really like, for example, like some component of a website, I think they laid out information in a really cool way, I'll screenshot it and save it to a file, kind of like a swipe file, just so I have that and can draw on it for inspiration. Yeah, so I think I also just work with a lot of really inspiring clients too, and their stories are really easy to get excited about. So that's very lucky for me.
I love that because finding inspiring clients is something that I think people can find really difficult. I think they can find it to be confusing. Like, how do I find my ideal client? Because there's so much narrative out there about
Absolutely
the ideal client, the perfect client, the dream client, and then you start to, at least I'll speak from experience, if it's not coming to you, you're like, what am I doing wrong? Like, where are my people?
Yes.
So has that happened to you, like in the beginning when you were kind of narrowing down who your client is?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in the beginning, so this was like July 2020 is when I went like full time with it. I definitely was like, I'll do every writing project that is offered to me or is available, and I'll work with anyone. So like, I think part of that too was just like trying on things to see what worked best for me or what I really was passionate about. Because my previous roles in content marketing, my full time roles had been like kind of this smattering of things. Like I did email, I did website, video scripts, content strategy. So I was like, okay, let's just kind of try on all these projects as testing and learning opportunities and see what I like as I go. And that's gradually how I started forming some of my core offerings out of like genuine needs that my clients were coming to me with. So some of the things I offered, I did not offer in 2020, but now I've like seen many of my clients with kind of the same presenting issue or kind of like concern or, thing they need help with their business, and that can help solve that. So I kind of narrowed things down. I think I'm most passionate and I'm best at websites. There's just something about it that my brain really enjoys. I know exactly like how long every page should be, how to write for website designers. So I can like pass it along to the design team and they can translate it easily for the client. So I think that's the part of storytelling that I enjoy the most. It's also like one of the first things that you will learn about someone these days is by going to their website. So it's super important to get right and to really take a lot of care and pride in. So yeah, that's kind of what I enjoy doing most.
Ooh, I've got like 3 things that really excited me about what you just said. Okay. One is I really feel like when starting out on a creative path, people can underestimate the testing and learning phase. Like you just were super clear. You got your reps in, you tried out so many different things, you refined, and then all of a sudden you started to see what your clients needed and what you were getting back, coming back to you like on a repeat basis.
Yes.
So
yeah,
that's key.
It was valuable.
100%. And the second thing you mentioned, which I think is really cool, is in terms of writing website copy or being a part of a website project, that you're a part of a broader team. So what you mentioned was your piece isn't the only piece. Like you are a part of a team. And so it's not operating in a silo, even if you're only one component of the bigger piece for the client or the project or the website, which is such a refreshing perspective.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And then the third piece, which I want your opinion. Websites are not dead. Like people sometimes, I've heard so much, oh, you just need a social account. You can make your 6 figures there. Like, you don't need a website. You don't need getting a website was one of the first things I did. And I was like, I need this. I want my storefront. Like, I want my storefront that says I'm open when I'm sleeping.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I cannot handle the people who say websites are dead. They're not dead. They're very much alive. I think a website still legitimizes you in a way that just social media cannot. Like, for example, like, let's say you are looking for the coaching industry. I'm going to use this as an example. Let's say you're looking for like a wellness coach and you find 2 people on Instagram that you really like. Are you more likely to pick the person who just has an Instagram, or are you likely to pick the person who has an Instagram, this beautifully curated website, a blog with more resources that really show their expertise, something that pops up and asks you to join, like a lead capture tool that asks you to join their email list? You're probably going to go with that person because a website just builds more trust and essentially is your storefront when you don't have that physical space. So super important. Even if it's like 2 pages, like I've seen websites even where it's just kind of like one landing page. That's okay. Like, just so you have something about your footprint that can be there and can like live eternally on when people are finding you in different ways. So important.
That's so true. And one thing I've noticed as I've been building out this podcast is I will go to folks' websites because I need to find a way to contact people if I don't yet already know them. But one thing I have noticed is not everybody has a contact button.
That is true.
It's not always there. So
yes.
Is there a strategy behind that?
That part
don't email me.
crushes me when I see that. I'm like, because people want to take the easiest action possible, especially when they're reaching out. When you're reaching out to someone you don't know, you don't want it to be work for them, like that makes it more likely for people to just abandon your website and be like, this is too hard. I'm going to go find someone else.
Yeah.
Like, make it easy for the people you're trying to reach. Like, have a contact button, have a short form. Like, don't make people copy your email address and like write you an email if that's not, how they want to do it. So I think I don't understand when people do that. I don't know if it's like some people want you to contact them like through social media, but like, just make it easy for people, give them ways to contact you in any area that they find you.
Ooh, that's good. Like, making it easy is so important. Even with email copy, even writing email copy, like all of it is about user experience, right? In a way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. And just thinking about that when you are like, if you're writing your own website or kind of like even updating your social media page, like, what is the way to make this easiest for your audience to find you, to reach you, to ask a question? Like, it's not for you as much as it is for them. Like, just think about them when you're designing kind of those flows of communication.
Have you found that there are certain things, if we haven't already mentioned it, that make client experience or user experience better when you're creating copy or creating content? Like, what things are you considering?
Yeah. So I think I'm considering like how much text is actually necessary. I see a lot of clients come to me, especially the ones that wrote their own sites, where there's just too much text and they want to include everything about their story on the homepage. And I'm like, we don't want to do that. We want to take them through a curated journey and experience that kind of winds them through to different areas of your site. And I think people also forget too, there is a thing called user overwhelm, where if there's too much information or you're just given too much right away, it can cause overwhelm and cause people to just like leave your site full force. We do not want that. So I think keeping things really clean and classic right now is really important, including enough text, but not too much. And like, I usually like leading with on every page with just like a short masthead section of copy, and then leading into a couple paragraphs, depending on the client, but just keeping it simple, keeping things really clear, making sure your navigation of your website is very accessible and like easy to follow. I think all of those things set you up for a good user experience. You want someone to like essentially get to your site and like feel like they can exhale, like they feel relaxed when they're going through your site. You don't want them to feel like, we've all been on the website where there's like a million buttons and there's a pop-up and then like, there's so much copy and it stresses you out. You don't want someone to feel that way.
And then there are ads.
Yes. Then there are
That
ads too on top of that. And you're
irrelevant.
like, what is happening in this website? And I would like to leave. And you don't even know. You're like, I don't care why I came here. I would like to get out.
That's so true. That's so true. So thinking about now on the flip side, if you're creating copy, when is there a sort of good indicator of when DIY makes sense versus hiring it out? Like, is it if somebody's at a certain phase in their business, or maybe because I know if it's something you really don't like it might make sense to hire it out. But in general, because of budgeting and things, when might it make sense to hire it out?
Yeah. So I actually have two different offerings kind of for this purpose. So I found that I work with a lot of small businesses. So folks who are just kind of starting out, some clients I've written for, it's like they just got the domain, like they're setting up their website for the first time. So they might not have a lot of, cash flow or revenue to invest in, writing a full website at this time. So I kind of try to meet people where they're at. I think budget and just like really starting out can be a concern for people. So I've also had clients too, a couple clients where they're very strong writers or they have a very strong voice and they want to, put some things down on the page themselves. So I kind of have two offerings. One is I will write the content fully myself. And then the second offering is more of a content coaching offering. So I will take what my client writes and I will take into account, tone of voice, brand strategy, messaging strategy, and actually do an interview with them about that. And ask them questions about their brand. And then I will go in and make all of these edits, strategic comments, kind of include prompts for updates just to align it more with their goals and their strategy. So it's kind of like I'll help elevate their copy into what they want it to be. But if there's someone who's like, my budget is more limited, or I really wanted to write this myself, that's kind of who that would be for. It kind of solves that problem of like, I want to work with someone, but it might not be the right time yet to go all in.
Ooh, what I'm thinking as we were just talking about that is, so we talk about the DIY side and then we talk about like the two options you have and also fully hiring it out. And then also the content coaching side. Something that we have not touched on is the AI as your editor.
Yeah.
And ChatGPT is super cool. I'll say that sometimes when I'll use it and I'll bounce ideas off of it because I'll write something and then I'll be like, yes. And it'll give me feedback and I'll be like, that's not what I was trying to say at all. So it'll help me refine. But where does that come into the process when you are a copywriter? You do this as full time and you can leverage the tool. Or you could if you wanted to. I'm curious where you land on this.
So I personally do not use ChatGPT, and I know there's a lot of different schools around this. Totally. I prefer not to, and mainly the clients I work with are ones who really want like an authentic human brand voice. And I think it's just I don't think ChatGPT is ready or intuitive enough to do that. Like, I think it's just like, it's not ready. It's not there yet. I've seen a lot of like really honestly concerning like ChatGPT responses where someone will put in a prompt and then it's like not at all what they wanted or written really poorly. So I would advise people not to use it as like your primary writing mechanism. That being said, I know a lot of copywriters who do use it for brainstorming and creating outlines. And I think that is great. I think as a supplemental tool, as kind of like, something to bounce ideas off and just like maybe learn about a new industry you're not super familiar with. I think that can be great. So I know a lot of people who will say like, what are, I don't know, an example. Let's say you're writing about like the fintech industry and you're like, hey, what are some common challenges that these businesses face? You can ask ChatGPT and then they'll spit out some topics for you. So it can help you ideate, but I would not use it to fully create what you're looking for. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. So when not using a tool like that as a copywriter, what are the tools or pillars that you might consider in terms of keeping your copy and your content streamlined and organized and relevant without relying on a tool?
Yeah, I think just like having a really ironclad, strong process is really important, especially if you don't use those tools. So like for me, I always have an interview-based process. Like I call my content writing style kind of like a relational-based content writing style. So I really want to get to know the client, ask them questions. With each project, we do like an hour-long strategy session, and I have a series of questions that I will ask them about their business and themselves. A lot of the times I find that they will say like, oh my gosh, I like learned something new. I actually had a client this week who was like, wow, like talking this out, I'm actually thinking about this completely differently. And like, I've landed on a new angle for what I'm trying to say. And I also give them that recording and transcript so they can have that forever and use that in their marketing. And then after that, I will do a competitive analysis. So I'll like look at what other folks in their field or, kind of top competitors are doing. I'll also look at kind of, I'll do like some social listening to look at like problem aware language and find out what problems the customer is facing, like that they're targeting. So for example, if I'm working with like a beauty and wellness coach, I will look at, common discourse on beauty and wellness and what problems folks are looking to alleviate and what they're using those services for, to then write the copy. So it's kind of a more holistic process and framework. I would just make sure that you have a process that works for you and that gets you kind of the answers that you are looking for.
Yeah. So we've talked a bit about, for the most part, I would say website copy. And so if we switch gear to socials, is it something that you take or consider the website copy sort of like umbrella copy that can then be distilled down into socials?
Yes. So that's actually something I'll do for clients as well, like just a full content strategy framework. And that involves three things at first. So we do content pillars, and that's three ways we want content to kind of correspond with the audience and compel action. So it's three buckets that you would use for any of your content. They have to fall in one. So maybe you're doing content that's more inspiring and like fun. So you have like kind of that bucket for that type of content. It would be more nuanced than that, but kind of setting up those overall content sort of segments for them. And then after that, for social, you still want them to align to the content pillars, but you also want each social media channel to have a different function. So like TikTok, you want to have a different identity and function than Instagram. So you're still making sure it aligns with those pillars and you're talking about those same things, but like the how and the why would be a little bit different on those channels, if that's making sense. And that website would be that more umbrella for those other channels.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And the content pillars are super helpful because it keeps you organized and really on task. So yes. That's something that I've definitely experienced, just like you were talking about with the website copy of, there's like all these ads or pop-ups that I don't even know why I came, but I want to leave. Same thing with content pillars, where you start to follow somebody because you think that they're going to, let's say, advertise. I don't know why this came to mind, like pet food. You're like, I love pet food and I want to follow them because my dog, I want to get natural pet food for my dog. Yeah. And then you're following them, and all of a sudden there's like all this content about like, let's see, I'm trying to think of like something something totally random. Like, I don't know, Thanksgiving, like Thanksgiving, how to make Thanksgiving recipes. And you're like, what? I don't understand. Like,
what happened here? Yeah. Like what happened? Yes.
And it can get confusing because you want to know about them, but you also want to strike the balance between knowing too much about their life and what you came there for, right? Like,
yes.
Is there a good way to strike a balance?
Yeah, I think just like understanding, like, this is like a hot take, semi-hot take. Yeah. SEO is not as vital to me as it used to be when working with clients. It's still very important, especially if you're trying to establish your brand. Yeah. I think writing, though, for user intent is more important than making sure you've got those SEO keywords in. Like, if you're just writing for SEO, that's how we see a lot of those Thanksgiving articles. So like people who are like, ooh, like I don't know, like Thanksgiving food for dogs ranked. Let's write a Thanksgiving article, like, but it has nothing to do with what they're actually, whatever, selling. So I think just like taking into account what are your customers actually looking for? When they're searching these keywords, what do they actually need from you? And like, how can you tell stories that correspond with that versus like reading something, and we've all read something where it's clearly like, okay, this is, they're trying to rank for a certain term, but this has no meaning or value to me. And that doesn't feel very good as a customer. And it can also decrease trust in the service and how likely you are to be like loyal to that brand over another.
Interesting. I don't know if I've ever like wondered that or like thought about that when I've seen like something that is perceived as really random or like not very relevant to their brand. But I will say that you just get a feeling. You just get a feeling like something's off here.
Yes. You're like, what happened? Like, this is not relevant, and then it makes you not perhaps trust the product. In turn, you're like, well, if they're sharing this information that does not correspond with me, how can I trust that the pet food is natural or like is what it's claiming to be? So it can be a whole cycle.
So this has been so interesting, and I want to make sure that we give some time to the other main thing that you're up to right now, which is pursuing a master's in art therapy.
Correct. That is correct. Yes.
Which is so awesome. So tell me about that. What got you into it, and you have to pick a specific field when you do this?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different paths you can take in like the counseling world. So there's, counselors, therapists, there's, social workers, there's marriage and family therapists, music therapists, and art therapists. And like music and art therapists fall under this umbrella of more expressive art therapies that are really coming up in more prominence now. Like I feel like 10 years ago, people were like, what is that? And now it's becoming a bit more, integrated into society and utilized in a lot of areas. Art therapy is specifically very good for dealing with trauma since you're processing emotions non-verbally and you can, make art and kind of distill your emotions onto a page. So that really was drawing me into it. I've made art most of my life and have really enjoyed art and seeing how it's not only affected me, but how it can also affect others through engaging with their own creativity. So I kind of knew I wanted to work in like a more wellness based field. Like I'm like a textbook highly sensitive person and like very empathic and very like engaged with my own inner world and like the stories of others. So I think honestly the turning point for me was during the pandemic when I kind of had a mini existential crisis and was like, I absolutely love writing, but I think I want something else in my career path as well, maybe a hybrid career. So I decided to pursue art therapy, and I'm now about halfway through my program up here in Milwaukee. So it's been very rewarding so far.
That's awesome. So what might it look like once it's done? Like, how do you use the degree in a practical way? I'm curious like what the path looks like. I'm sure there's many different within art therapy. There's many different ways you could use it.
Yeah. So I'm actually in a program that is kind of this dual art therapy counseling program. So I'm eligible to get my LPC license, licensed professional counselor, when I'm done with the program, as well as my registered art therapist credential. So there's a lot of paths you can take. Art therapy is practiced in a lot of settings. Like there's, private practice for art therapy, also in a lot of, hospital and medical settings, elder care settings, veteran settings, really any kind of population, medical or mental health or psychiatric settings as well. So very similar to kind of where you could work as a counselor, but you'd just be doing it through a different lens. Not as much talk therapy, but just more art and talk-based therapy.
That's really cool. I personally have felt like for me, I started similarly during the pandemic doing a lot of writing and realizing that I really liked storytelling and I really liked putting together narratives and different emotions and tapping into different emotions in that way, because it allowed me to tap into places I hadn't yet explored.
Mhm.
And so in some ways I felt like my avenue was music, and I felt like in some ways that it was like art therapy. Like it was so therapeutic
Yeah.
to be able to express in that way and also have something to bounce all of your feelings off of. So like if you
Yes.
had a song and you're like, oh my God, like all these things that the song is saying, I feel all these things from what it's saying, from what it sounds like, from the whole thing. Like there's so many layers to it
Yes.
that it was like the gift, sort of. Didn't feel like it at the time. The gift that kept on giving, because you're like,
Yes.
oh wow, the more I listen to it, the more this is unraveling.
Absolutely.
And
Oh my gosh.
it's so, to me, it was so life-changing that I wish that more people knew about just art therapy in general. Obviously, I'm talking about my own like at-home process that then I took into therapy to like work out
Yeah.
and process. But I just wish more people knew about how powerful this is, because I think sometimes people hear therapy and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm not going to therapy," or like, "I don't
For
need
sure.
therapy,"
For
or
sure.
there's like this wall up. And the music
Yes.
or the art to me kind of like I'm like breaks the wall down or softens it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I love that you had that experience. And I think too, like, I think some folks forget that like human beings have been using art and music for therapeutic means for centuries. Like we've been creating art for as long as time has existed. And I think art and music both bring about this great resonance that talking alone simply cannot do, because it activates different regions of your brain. Like if you're listening, there's so many studies like about listening to classical music and the areas of the brain it activates, or like what regions of the brain light up on a scan when you're doing actively engaging in art making. And it's just like you're by processing things and involving those kind of expressive tactics, it's just like a different way to kind of like engage memories and release trauma and kind of heal from difficult situations than talk therapy alone. So it's really, really cool, just the kind of the depth and the results that are possible with those therapies.
Do you know what it might look like yet? Because I know you said you're just about halfway through. So do you know what it might look like yet, out of curiosity? Like if somebody wanted to find an art therapist where they live, what it might look like. Obviously, it could be different per person in terms of who's reaching out and then who the art therapist is. But maybe like, is there a consistent process in terms of make art, share art, talk about the art, or is it not like, is there not?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it looks different depending on what setting you're in. So a lot of art therapy can be held in group settings, and a lot of art therapy can be done, privately in a private practice or one-on-one mental health setting. So it could look a little bit different. I think like some therapists, you could use art in the beginning of a session if someone comes in and they're really distressed, or, you could do a bit of talking and then move into like a really focused art directive in the middle of the session, or use it to close as a way to kind of ground yourself before you leave. So there's a lot of different ways to engage with the process. I think too, what's really cool about art therapy is if someone is like maybe reticent to share or process their feelings, art can be a way to like speak for them, if you will, like kind of contain those feelings if they're not comfortable perhaps sharing yet, or really diving into something. The art can kind of help them explore that. And then in a group setting, that would look similar, except there would be in certain groups some sharing involved too, of like, sharing around kind of a common focus of the group and processing those emotions more together. So there's a lot of ways to bring it in and really have it be this really inspiring force that can really help people create change.
Something that I was just thinking about when you talk about the group settings, I don't know why it just reminded me of this. There's something I heard of called dream circles. And if I can find it, I'll link it in the show notes, where I think the concept is like you come together and every person, I think, shares maybe a part of their dream, and then it turns into like one big themed
Cool.
dream. But I feel like, is the art therapy in groups, like everybody brings their own art, or is it like you build off of one art project?
Yeah, so it can be like there are different types of groups. So there's open studio where folks can just come in and make whatever they'd like, and there's no like really prompt. And then there could be more focused art therapy groups where it's like, let's say it's a grief group and they're all coming together around a loss. The art therapist or therapist could have more of like a um, directive plan, like, hey, make this art corresponding with this prompt, and then kind of share in the end to like build that community and also like get more focused with it. So there's kind of a range, and it all depends on like what the goals of the group are, whether it's to, foster creativity and skill building or more like move through a specific event or situation.
That's really interesting. So it almost sounds like even a family that's processing a loss or something could go all together to the art therapy
Yes.
group versus it being like a group of people you don't know necessarily.
Yes. And there is like family, I believe it's called like family art therapy too, where you can do art therapy with an entire family system and kind of identify patterns or relational, things to work on or things to process together in a family. So there's so many applications for it that are really exciting. And I think art therapy is only going to become more prominent as time goes on.
It's so exciting to me to see how, yes, I'll say how far we've come as a society and how by opening up to this type of method, like how much more advancement we can make in terms of mental health, because mental health like has been stigmatized, right? And it's like, how can we make it more, I would say more mainstream, but more just generally accepted?
Yeah. And I think going back to something you said earlier too, I think like specifically, I know like my parents and my grandparents' generations of folks, kind of being like, it just wasn't a thing to go to therapy. And if you went to therapy, it kind of could mean something, right? Like now I'm glad that the stigma is at least lessening a bit. And folks are like, I'm going to go to therapy just because it makes me feel great. It doesn't maybe mean anything, right? And I think personally, I believe everyone could benefit from therapy. I go to therapy. I think it's really important, especially as someone going into the field too, to say like, hey, I go to therapy as well. Like it's useful for me to sort out my own emotions, process my everyday life, and continue to grow as a person. And I think that's really what the work of therapy is. It's becoming more authentically yourself. It's kind of setting yourself free from things that maybe were holding you back or painful emotions. So you can move forward and feel more yourself and more alive in your life. So that's kind of, I think, hopefully as we move forward, mental health therapy will not have as much of a stigma, and folks can feel, comfortable going to therapy and saying, I want this dedicated space to, speak freely about anything I need to and work on things I'd like to.
It's so true. And something that comes up for me is one that you're mentioning, that it's like this feeling more aliveness. Like I think sometimes when, in my own experience, when I've buried emotions or not been willing or ready to process something yet, like there was like this general sense of like feeling less alive, like less, like, I mean, you could call it numb maybe, but just depending on what you're going through. I don't want to use that word necessarily, like, but just not feeling excited or amped up for the day, or like the world's a positive place, even with all the difficult things going on in the world, that you can still feel like just like some sense of good and positivity and happiness about being in the world, being a part of it. So I love that you mentioned that about aliveness, because I think that's something that I definitely, even as like as I age gracefully, my goals I see them like shifting, and like I still have the career professional goals, but some of the goals, like something like feeling alive and excited for the day, is like a bigger goal for me than like some sort of achievement or accomplishment. So I think that's also what, in my own experience with the art that I've made I think that's been something that has really helped me depend less on that outside validation or that outside thing, and more like, oh, like by doing this art, by doing this really creative experience, by flowing with whatever is coming through the pen or the paintbrush or the music, that I've then been able to experience just more peace. So
absolutely.
I think you touched on a lot of really cool stuff there. And I'm really excited. I'm really excited for this journey for you to finish and go into the profession at whatever way that ends up looking like for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think what you said too, it's like, just like when you're not living as yourself or aligned with yourself, you're going to feel discomfort in some way, you know, or like whether that's just feeling lackluster or, you know, not feeling as excited about things, you know, there's just something that these media, specifically more creative art-based media, can help you really kind of discover who you really are and then live as that person. So I think they're very powerful. There's still so much left to learn about how they kind of affect our minds and help us work through things. But I think there's a lot of potential there, and I'm glad that you have found that.
Yes. And speaking of media in a different way, what might you want to share with the audience about the thought that it's required to have all this social media presence in this day and age to make a business, to have yourself be like, have this social identity? Like, what would you share with them on how you've made it work?
Yeah, I think like there's a lot of quote unquote rules that we've been given about how to have a business and grow a business today. And folks can really fall into those traps of that pressure. I quit social media in 2019. So right before the pandemic. That was actually really interesting because then when the pandemic hit, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't use my traditional coping mechanisms for this and like distract myself. So that was interesting. But yeah, I've been off social media except LinkedIn since 2019. I just found that it was whenever I opened any app, mainly Instagram, made me feel terrible about myself. Like I just felt like I was always like subconsciously comparing myself to other people, even if it was friends of mine and I was happy for them. You know what I mean? It was just a lot to take in. And I also felt like I gradually started. There was one day I was taking a photo and I was like already thinking of the caption for Instagram. And I was like, I don't like that. Like, I don't like how this has made me consume the world around me. So I decided to quit. It was the best thing I ever did. I found that I did not really need it. And I decided just to use LinkedIn for my business. And it has been just fine. Like, sure, could I have like gotten, you know, more people for my email list or had more people find me if I had other channels? Of course. But by kind of focusing on one space and like leaning in there and also making it very controlled for myself and setting boundaries, I'm able to like really promote my business in the way that feels authentic and good to me. And at the end of the day, that is what I think matters most. So if you're feeling any sort of like, if you're listening to this and you're feeling any sort of pressure that you need to be on certain channels or you need to be doing all these things, like, but they're not actually making you feel good, that's having a negative effect on your own well-being. And that's the most important thing. Like, you absolutely can grow your business without social media or with minimal social media. I will name drop a friend of mine who she owns a podcast studio. And she is incredible. She actually left social media and has created a lot of discourse around, you know, running a business without social media. She even has she has some like free materials, I believe, that you can download. And then I believe she even did a course. Her name is Amelia Ruby, Hruby. And she is super successful. And she just sometimes posts on LinkedIn, I think. Like, she does not have traditional social media channels. And is doing very well. So I think there's just there's so many things you can do besides post on social media to grow your business. And it's all about finding what truly feels good to your nervous system, your body, your mind, and going that way. It's also like owning your own business should be fun. And if you feel like you have to post 10 times a week and you absolutely hate it, that's going to take a toll on you burnout wise eventually.
That's such a good point. And I know that I feel like you are so good about creating the boundaries around just availability and socials. I loved you have it. Even when I was emailing with you, you had like an amazing out of office. I forget what it was at this point, but you have like out of office that is like super clear with like clear communication of when you're available or when you might respond. And then just taking a break from maybe even electronics on certain days of the week.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do have an autoresponder on my email at all times because I don't want the expectation for either myself or my clients that I'm always going to be online. Like I'm doing other things. I actually hold traditional 9 to 5 hours. So I like never check my email or work at night, and I don't work on weekends. And that's just what works best for me. But the autoresponder tells people like, hey, I'll respond, by this date. Like I'm not going to respond 5 minutes from now, probably. And that's okay. And I found that it just kind of decreases that urgency that we all feel. And that's kind of what I'm fighting against. I've been pretty bad at this over the last few weeks, but I try not to look at my phone at all on Sundays. Like obviously if I need to like check the weather, I will do that, but it's mostly like texting, calling, anything on the internet. I will try not to do that. And I also try not to look at my phone 2 hours before bed. Just to like keep those boundaries. Like I feel like my body can actually feel when I have not used my phone for a while, and I feel just like lighter, and my mind feels like my thoughts are moving at a normal pace. So I think it's like really important just integrating whatever it looks like for you. Like you don't have to plan like a big week-long vacation to get rest. You can build rest into your week through self-care, and you can like build gradual breaks, whether it's from technology or anything else that you spend a lot of time with. If you're like watch a lot of YouTube or something, like just setting limits on what you're consuming and how you're spending your time, and technology, just to give yourself a bit of a mental break.
It's a good point that you bring up about how you're able to like slow down, because when you're on socials, I guess I'm just thinking out loud as we're talking. It's like your brain's going so fast. It's like, this is all the things that you've just ingested, because you've switched. Like even if you're just doing like a 1 minute scroll, you've switched like topics and industries probably in general, like many times throughout that minute. And your brain's like just spinning and going quickly. And it's trying to keep up and process the information. And I feel like we're not made for that.
No, we're not made for that. And I don't know if you've done any like research on just like, I've done a lot of watching documentaries and reading about how social media was designed. And like a lot of the apps are designed like slot machines. So they're actually designed like, the pulling action or the swiping, like it's designed to, your brain will gradually just want more and more. It's dopamine. It's like what your brain wants, and that will give it to you, or the illusion that will give it to you by continuing to read and scroll and swipe, is kind of what the apps are designed to do. Like they're designed to be addictive, and they're designed to be difficult to break away from. That's why, like, if you're ever reach for your phone and you're like, why did I just pick that up? Like it's designed for you to do that. It's designed for you to go into an app and spend 3 hours on it and then be like, what happened? Like that's it working. So we have to actively like make radical choices and do things in opposition to that if we want to keep our technological peace in some way.
Now that you mention it, I didn't know this. I'm thinking about I'll out myself on this thing. So you know how every week your iPhone will send you a message that's like, you used your phone for like how many ever hours.
Yes.
So yesterday I got that message, and then it has, and I don't know if it's always had this, like pickups, exactly what you just said.
Ooh.
It's like today I've picked up my phone 22 times. I think this is how I read it, and it's noon. So like that seems like a lot.
It seems like a lot, but it probably doesn't feel like that many when you're doing it. It's just like, it's so natural for us to like pick it up and check, right? Like it totally makes sense.
And then it tells you what you checked. It's like first used after pickup. And so then at that point you're like, oh, it's giving you the data.
Yes.
It's giving you the data, and it's saying this is what you're doing. And we can either ignore it, or we can create these boundaries around it and be like, why did I pick my phone up 22 times.
Yeah.
And what was I looking at? What was I doing? Was it the weather?
What did I
Or
do?
was it
Yes.
Instagram?
What am I doing? Yes, absolutely. And that was one thing that I don't know. I feel like putting in place those structures has been tough because some days it's like, oh, I just want to like, watch a TikTok video on Sunday or something and whatever you want to do. But it feels so much better once you're out of that for a couple hours. And then you're like, oh, I just took a walk and I felt really present, or like I read a book for like an hour and that like I didn't check my phone while I read the book, and that feels really nice. So I think there are just ways, like everyone's relationship to technology is different and everyone has a different either like limit or even desire for how much they want to consume. And I think it's just like getting honest about how much you really want to be engaging with it, and then being like, okay, what do I need to do to put some strategies in place around this that will make me feel my best?
I was just wondering if this is something like, right, we've been talking about social media a lot, if it's something that deters people from going back and reading a book because they don't have like the patience for the long form content like that, or if it's actually going to drive people back to that of like, no, I want to read books now, like stay off social. Because at least for me, like I go through phases of like, oh, I love reading, I want to read, and I go to the library and buy books, and then other phases where I'm like, I don't want any more information. I don't care.
Absolutely. I think they're like, that's a really good question. I've thought about this and I'm like, is there going to be like a movement of people eventually who are like going analog, or like slow living movement, who are like not going to want to like do this fast paced technological lifestyle we've been accustomed to? I think that's really cool. And I think there are already like a couple kind of signs of that. There's this company called The Nearness. I believe it's out of New York, and they have like these courses and like I believe small groups where they help you like develop a greater connection with yourself, and like through all of these means, educational means. And I think that's really cool. So there's things popping up that are like, antidotes to technology that we're consuming. There's also like the light phone. I don't know if you've heard of the light phone.
I've seen it.
Yeah, it's like it only has like text and like one other thing on it, and that's like all you can do. It's a very simple interface. And I'm like, I think we're going to see more of that stuff come up as time goes on, because I think like it's just not, I think that it will have to burst at some point. I don't think everyone's going to be so like loving of social media forever, right? There's not everyone, at least. There's going to be kind of a group of people who pull back from it, or it's going to change in how it, is part of our lives. So I think that will be interesting to see, because there's this inertia right now of like AI, technology, everything in that wheelhouse. And I don't think that it will be, I don't think that it will always be, of superior importance to everybody.
So speaking of where people can be found, how can people work with you or find you?
Absolutely. That's a great question after I just said that I am unreachable on social media. You can find me on LinkedIn. I have a very common name, so you might just have to, look. I believe, let me see. I'm the one in Milwaukee. I've got a photo of me in a blue shirt on this leather couch. You can find me there. And then you can also email me or visit my website. It's just sarahbrookswrites.com, or my email is sarahbrookswrites@gmail.com. So you can reach me there. There's a little contact form on my website if you'd rather reach out there. But I also do read as many as I can of my LinkedIn DMs, and you can also reach out to me there.
Perfect. Well, thank you. I'll definitely link all of that in the show notes.
Thank you.
I can't wait for people to get in touch with you.
I know. Hello to anyone out there who would like to chat further about any of these topics. I can talk about them for days, and appreciate the space to do so.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming on the show, and I hope that you have a great 2024.
Thank you. You too. Can't believe it. 2024. Wow.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you learned something new and embrace being the student of your own life until the time we meet again. If you'd like a way to support the show and to hear more of this content, it means so much to me for you to take a few minutes out of your day to leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'd love to stay connected with you on Instagram or TikTok at Adriana Goes Creative. You can find me and hit follow while you're feeling inspired right after listening to the show. I can't wait to get a DM from you hearing what you loved about it and what you desire to hear more of. I appreciate each and every one of you so much. I'll talk to you soon. This podcast is for entertainment and general informational purposes only. I am not a licensed healthcare professional, and this podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician or other qualified professional.